Run, river, run, run through the hills. Run, river, run to the sea. Run, river, run to your place beneath the sun. Run, river, run over me.
Hi, this is Jan Lewis. Welcome to be my guest. Today we have with us Art Sesnovich. Did I say that right?
You did.
He is the co-author of this. Wait till you see this book, Mumblings of a Mortician, and it's about Peter Stephan, the real Peter Stephan, who was in Worcester. And what was the full name of the funeral home?
It was Graham Putnam Mahoney Funeral Parlors.
Welcome, Art.
Thank you.
This is. I met the Peter Stephan once, many years ago. He seemed very quiet, very serious. But when you read this book, this man has a hell of a sense of humor. First of all, when did you and Peter and your co-author? Let's give a shout out.
Co-author, his name is Frank Quaglia, and he contributed stories. Peter told stories to both of us separately, and then we wrote them up and then combined them together to make the collection.
How long did it take you to do it?
How long did it take, or how long did it take?
How long did it take to get this ready to go?
Well, it probably took about 6 to 8 months. But then there was design, and we had some design issues and whatnot. So, honestly, from the beginning of the concept, it was probably a year.
That is fantastic. And he did live to see.
He did.
He lived to see. This is Peter. Now, I'm going to show you a picture. Paula's going to try to zero in as much as she can. But this is the cover of it. Reminds me of my grandfather with the pipe. There is a wonderful picture in here of Peter. Hopefully, here he is. He played the saxophone, too.
Professionally.
Right here. Can you get this guy? It's amazing. And he actually lived in probably the second floor of the funeral parlor.
The funeral parlor, yeah.
It's down on South Street, right?
It's on Main Street.
Okay, just before you. Well, it's in that section that's not too good, right?
It's a little dicey, but it's just right there in the middle of everything.
Yeah. You got the picture, Paul? Yeah, this guy, oh my gosh. What a sense of humor. And he is the gentleman who stepped up to the plate, the only funeral director, in our country, when there was the bombing on the Marathon in Boston. No funeral directors wanted to take the body of the brother who was killed.
That's true. In fact, I would correct you slightly. He was the only funeral director in the world that would. They were in touch with. They were literally in touch with Putin in Russia about taking the body back to Russia, taking the body back to all different countries. And then, of course, here nobody wanted to touch him because it was so toxic. Peter's attitude was simply, look, I'm not in a position to judge people for what they've done on this earth.
Sure.
I just know that everyone deserves a burial. He's a human being. I'm repulsed by what he did, but he's still a human being and deserves to be buried like everybody else.
Yeah, I remember watching on TV, I think many of us do, watching all the protesters in front of the funeral parlor there in Worcester. And tell me what Peter did for those people, though.
Well, he was actually there were some death threats and there was some dicey situations, but for the most part he was actually very happy because he kept saying, I'm glad I live in a country where people can protest peacefully when they don't like something. And to show his gratitude for that, he used to bring pizza to the protesters. And when we asked him why, he said, these people want your head on a platter. He's like, yeah, but they're still hungry. So,
did it help? Did it change things a little?
I can't say definitively, but I have to think that there were some people who thought, we're tearing this guy down and he's bringing us food. So, while I don't know for sure, I have to believe that some people changed their minds.
It had to have wakened them up a little bit about this guy's character. He was terrific.
He did a lot of things that showed his character.
Oh, yeah. How long was he there? What, did you say 40 years?
40 years.
40 years.
Yes.
And he probably bought it from the original owners, and it was in Boston.
The original funeral home of the same name was in Boston, then he moved it to that building in Worcester.
Graham Putnam and Mahoney.
Graham Putnam Mahoney. There's no and, which always confused me. I always wrote and.
Graham Putnam Mahoney. So in the beginning, there were 3 gentlemen that started it.
Correct.
And then he bought it like 40 years ago. What if he raised his children there?
Pretty much did. I don't know much about his kids. He didn't never talk much about his family. Per
How
se.
did you meet him?
I met him actually through my wife. My wife got to meet him professionally, and after dealing with him on some professional activities, they just sort of took a liking to each other.
Yeah.
And then after a few months, she said, you should meet this guy Peter. He's just a real card.
Yeah.
Let me introduce you, and why don't you guys talk? You have the same sense of humor, and you may hit it off. And she was spot on.
Well, yeah, his sense of humor. It was anything like my grandfather. It's sort of a tongue-in-cheek type.
It was tongue. Peter had a very versatile sense of humor. He could be very, very cerebral as to where you had to really think about the joke, but he was not above telling a horrible pun.
No.
And and just cracking up at his own joke. So his humor kind of spanned the
whole gamut.
the spectrum.
Did you go to the actual funeral home to talk with him about to go and do the book?
Oh, I was there many times.
You were.
Oh, a variety of times. Yeah.
And he was such a good guy. I think you were telling me beforehand that the hospital would call and say, "Can you come pick this deceased person up?" And he'd be there, thinking what? He was going to get paid?
No, he. After a while, he pretty much knew he wasn't going to get paid. He was sort of, last gas on the turnpike. Whenever nobody claimed a body in many of the hospitals, they would eventually turn to Peter and say, "Peter, we got another one for you." Now, the state did provide, and don't quote me on this, but I think they provided $1,100 per funeral, but that didn't cover the cost. So basically, every time Peter did one of these homeless or indigent type funerals, he was losing money.
And from what I read in one of the newspapers, I think they did a great big article about him. Probably the Telegram. Is that he was such a good egg that he would take in these people who they couldn't locate a family or whatever. And as you said, he knew he could not cremate anybody until he tried every person in the tried. Did that happen a lot when he couldn't reach somebody for the body?
It happened a lot. If they couldn't reach somebody in the end, he could cremate them. But, there were certain religions and cultures where cremation, first of all, isn't allowed.
Oh, yeah.
So it wasn't like he just did this kind of, cursory, I'll just make a few phone calls. He dug really deep trying to find any relative, any friend, any part of the family he could find. So he did his due diligence. But in the end, if he couldn't, he just did whatever he thought was best.
This book is fantastic. Mumblings of a Mortician, true, about Peter Stephan, the funeral director over in Worcester who would take in anybody, and if you didn't have family or they couldn't pay, he stepped up to the plate and he did that. I don't know, do they make people like that anymore?
I don't know of any.
How did your buddy there, how did you two co-author it? How did you get together? Did he visit with Peter too?
Well, it's a funny story because Peter came to me and said, "I'd like to write this book. Let me tell you some stories."
Yeah.
But he knew Frank from a previous life, Frank's also a writer. Yeah. He went up to Frank separately and told him, "Let me tell you some stories about it." And I don't know if he forgot that he told Frank. And so he introduced me to Frank and said, "I'd like Frank to help you with the book." Well, when we got to talking, I said, "Geez, well, Peter's giving me like 40 stories." He goes, "Geez, he's giving me like 40 stories too." And I said, "What are you talking about? I'm working on the book." He said, "No, I'm working on the book." So neither of us literally knew. We were doing this separately.
Yeah.
But then once we finally figured it out, we pulled our resources.
And you got along great.
Got along great.
Who is the designer of the cover? Did Peter choose that?
Peter did not choose that, although, to be honest, Peter had that in his files, and we chose that for the cover. The name of the designer has escaped me, but she did do a tremendous job.
Did he come up with the name Mumblings of a Mortician?
He did.
That sounds like him.
And we tried, I always wanted to one-up him. We tried like heck to come up with something better, and we couldn't.
Well, I love the way
it just rolls off the tongue.
Oh, it does. Before we forget, Art, how can they reach you and obtain a copy of the book?
Well, the best way to get a copy of the book is to go on Amazon. Yeah. It is selling on Amazon. If you go to Amazon and just plug in Mumblings of a Mortician, it'll come up as Mumblings of a Mortician book, and then you'll be able to get it either in print on demand or in Kindle.
Now, are you appearing places, doing book signings, that type of thing?
We haven't really done that yet, but we're probably going to start looking into it.
Oh, this is going to be especially in Massachusetts and in Worcester County. I would think this is going to fly off as soon as people meet you. Oh, definitely. Go there. I'm going to let you start. You brought some favorites of yours. You start. I've already got some of mine.
Well, some, as I mentioned to you earlier, Jan, some of them are just, I can give quick summaries. Others I can read sort of all. Well, a Wing and a Prayer was interesting. There was an Asian funeral, and apparently one of the Asian traditions is to put a cooked chicken into the coffin with a person, so they have something to eat on the way to the hereafter.
Oh.
Okay. So late that night, after the people had left the chicken, he saw one of his employees eating a chicken. And he knew exactly what the answer was going to be to the question. But he said, "Where did you get that chicken?" And he said, "Someone left it in a casket. Can you believe that?" So now Pete is freaking out because he's just ruined the whole thing, right? This was actually in the morning when they were going to be coming back. So he runs to the store, gets a cooked chicken, puts it in. They show up 2 minutes later and said, "Thank you for taking care of this. By the way, it's still hot. I mean, we brought this yesterday, and this thing's still steaming hot." And he said, "Oh, well, you know what I did? Every 30 minutes I heated it up to maintain its spiritual value."
Oh, my God.
And they loved him for it. They thought, "Oh, thank
you
you
for..." That's
for..."
an Asian tradition.
It was for these people. I honestly don't know if it was an Asian funeral.
Yeah.
And he sort of freaked out, but just said, "No, I'll just buy another one." But when they questioned him on it, he had a quick answer for it.
He had some, there's definitely one here, the watery grave. The fellow that was 600 pounds, tell us, he was living in the basement. Tell us what happened with the pipes and all.
He was living Peter buried more than his share of 600 and 700 pound people. I don't know what it was, but they tried to get him out of his basement, this gentleman who was very, very heavy, and they threw some rope over the water pipe, and then when they lifted the guy, the pipe broke. So, as he said, "I thought I was on the Titanic," because water just rose up to his neck, and I honestly don't know how it ended with them finally getting him out. But I don't know if they had to call the Coast Guard or what it was, but it was really a pretty dicey situation. He almost met his demise on a few situations like that.
He had 3 helpers?
He had, yes, he had 3 people that helped him collect
the bodies. Were they
bodies.
volunteers or
No, they were employees.
They were?
Yeah.
Because I know when you go to a funeral, usually the guys are dressed in black suits, whatever, and they're right there waiting for you. I like this one too. Fashion statement. Do you remember that one?
I do.
Tell us.
Wait a minute. You're going to have to give me
the
first.
one about the corset?
Oh, I'm going to let you tell that one.
Okay, all right. Girls out there, a lot of us had grandmoms who wore corset, hold their tummies in. Well, this is very quick. Fashion statement. A woman handed me an archaic corset and said she wanted her deceased mother to be buried in it. Okay. I told her that was fine, but asked her if she realized the corset had all the elegance of a bulletproof vest. She pressed the battle wear against my chest and glared at me. I smiled approvingly. He knew. That's it. Customer's always right.
Customer is always right.
They did look like battle gear. I remember my grandmother. They're trying to get into these things. How did they eat?
How you ladies did it, I'll never know. Speaking of fashion statement, there was another one we called tie-dye, where the woman had said, "You did a great job on my husband. He looks wonderful. There's only one thing. I just don't really like the tie he's wearing." So Peter, without saying a word, said, "I'll take care of it." He took off the tie he was wearing at that moment, which was his favorite tie, took the tie off the gentleman, the deceased, put his tie on the gentleman, and she said, "That's so much better." But he did say in retrospect, "I hated his tie too, so I just threw it away." But his tie is now buried for all eternity, his favorite tie.
I'm surprised. Again, we don't meet people like this very often.
Instead of saying, "I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do about it," or he took off his own tie.
And he didn't even say, "Well, you can go down to the store and pick."
No, there was never a question. He just did it.
There was something inside of him. I wonder if he ever knew he was going to be a funeral director. He played saxophone.
Played saxophone professionally. He was actually very good. He would play on Saturday nights at some of the Boston supper clubs. He was a very eclectic gentleman.
Yeah. Did he go to college, too, or grow up here?
I'm going to be honest, I don't think he did.
Yeah.
I don't think he did. I think out of high school he just started working. And
I wonder where he was from. That's an interesting name, Stefan. Stefan.
Where his family was from, I'm not sure.
Was it Romanian, maybe?
It may be. He wasn't all that forthcoming about details of his family, and I didn't press.
You know how you can look up online, like, surname origin, Lewis, right? I can look up, and usually it'll tell vastly where it came from.
Sure.
So I think I put his on. I don't know why Romania sticks in my mind. I don't know, but it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
It could have been anywhere. Now, let's see. What else did I do? Oh, my goodness. hang in there, because boy, did I love this book. I was reading it to my husband. Oh God, No Way Out. The guy can tell it, go for it.
Okay, no way out. One of his employees went into the back of one of the hearses to get something,
Yeah.
and the door shut. And he was gone for about 45 minutes. And Peter and the other employee said, I mean, what happened to this guy? I mean, is he okay? Whatever. They went out there. He's trapped in there. And they start yelling at him and saying, they get him out and said, well, why didn't you just open the door and get out? And he goes, you dumbasses, there's no handle on the inside of a hearse door.
No.
Peter totally forgot that. So he was just trapped in there until somebody came by, which was Peter. So they had a good laugh at his expense.
Was he in with the casket too? This guy?
No, he was just in there checking something
Well,
out.
couldn't he?
No.
Was there a barrier? He couldn't climb over the back seat and open the door and get out?
There's no way to open the door from inside the hearse.
No, I mean like, okay, the casket's in, not the window door, but couldn't he have gone over the back seat to get to a door that opened?
No. Glass. There was glass there.
Oh my God.
So he's just trapped. It was a prison until he got in there.
Who took the picture? Was it after the fact?
It was after the fact. To be honest, we did stage that. But that's probably what he looked like when it happened.
The guy is like, got his hand on the window like, get me out of here.
Let me
Can
out
you
of
get
here.
that, Paul? This is precious. Did you guys merge together to do a lot of the pictures?
We did. We took some. A few are stock photos. A few are ones he had in his archives.
Yeah.
You know, we did kind of a mix and match of a lot of stuff.
Art, tell us again how they can get your book.
The book can be acquired through, just go to Amazon. Everybody knows the link for Amazon. And just plug in Mumblings of a Mortician, and it'll come up Mumblings of a Mortician book. Click on that, and you will be able to buy it either in Kindle form or in print on demand. And the print on demand is amazing because they literally
Yeah.
print one book at a time as
Yeah.
they get it.
Yeah.
And you'll have it within, I mean, if you have Prime, you'll have it overnight. But normally it's 4 to 5 days.
Are you available for people to ask you to come and do appearances, that type of thing?
Oh, of course.
Good? Aha, that's really good, because I was telling him this is going to really make a hit.
Absolutely.
On the back of it shows the funeral home there in Worcester. When Peter Steffen handled funeral arrangements for Tamara Tsarnaev, remember the bombing of a marathon, he experienced ridicule, praise, harassment, and death threats. Throughout the decades, he has encountered vampire wannabes, warlocks, ghost hunters, thieves, and the craziest people imaginable. You've got some there. Go for it. Which one?
I have one that's just my favorite. I don't know why it hits me. It's called Slipping Away. And it's very short, so I can read it. An older, sullen-looking gentleman came into our place looking to make his own funeral arrangements. After gathering some preliminary information, he looked up at me with hollow eyes and said, "Listen, Peter, I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't do much good in this life. So let's make this simple. Cremate me and hold on to my ashes. Then, in the winter, when it's wet, icy outside, spread them on the sidewalk so no one will fall. I'd like to finally do some good, even when I'm dead."
Did Peter do that?
He did it.
So the man knew he was dying, or he was planning ahead?
He was planning ahead, but I'm guessing he was older. And Peter said, "Okay, I'll do that." Kept his ashes, first winter, spread them.
Did you read the one about, definitely, the one about the guy that calls up and said he wants to commit suicide? God.
Peter violated every precept of suicide hotlines. You're supposed, and again, I've never been on a suicide hotline, but there was a poem you're trying to empathize and do. Peter did none of the sort. Peter insulted him. Peter called him names. Peter just hit him at a place where the guy wanted to stay alive just to pay Peter back for being such a jerk. And when the guy kept saying, "Well, I'm going to kill myself this way," Peter would say,
No,
"Well, that's fine, but this is going to happen, and so it's going to go wrong." He says, "All right, I'll do this." He goes, "That may not do good either." And then he finally said he'll hang himself in his parents' backyard. And Peter said, "Now I like the sentimental angle. That's good, right in your parents' backyard. But you're probably going to end up with a broken neck, and if you don't die, it's going to be wicked painful. And now your parents have to cut you down.
Yeah.
So you're being really selfish here."
Yeah.
So the guy was so incensed and so angry, but he called over a period of 4 days.
Yeah.
So after a while, the guy just kind of forgot what he was going to do.
Yeah.
And he and Peter actually became fast friends.
He came to meet Peter.
He came to meet Peter, and they went out to lunch a few times. And there's no doubt, that he saved his life.
Why would he call a funeral home?
Because I think he wanted I remember the story. He wanted advice on how to kill himself, basically, and he figured who better than a funeral director, because he's seen people die every which way. So he wanted to run these ideas by Peter.
Yeah.
And every time the guy said, well, I'm going to do this, instead of trying to say, well, don't do it, Peter said, sure, that's a great idea, but if you're going to do it this way. And
This is reverse psychology.
it's completely reverse psychology. And you know, but it was Peter's way.
Yeah.
Peter had a way of pissing you off, but not pissing you off.
Yeah.
And, you know, you just wanted to keep talking to him, even though he was angering you.
He was eclectic, that's for sure. What was the group? Was it Goth or something that was hanging out on the front stoop just before the funeral? There was something. They were in strange get-ups, and I don't remember. He probably saw tons of that. Anyway.
Oh, in this?
Yeah.
Well, he actually had a nudist wake.
Oh, that's right, the nudist way.
And he said, I'll do the nudist wake, but the only condition is you got to stay inside, you can't go outside. And
Yeah.
of course, the second they held it, these two nudists decide, I'm going to go out for a smoke.
Yeah.
They go out on the front porch, you know, in full Monty
Yep.
mode, and police were there within, 10 minutes. And Peter had to talk the police down, and they said, look, you can do it, but you got to stay inside. So
That's a very open-minded dude. I don't know any funeral director who would allow that.
I don't either. Peter was, you know, Peter was probably the least judgmental person I've ever met. He just didn't really care what. Let me rephrase that. It's not that he didn't care what you thought. It just, you could think and do whatever you want as long as it didn't bother him. I mean, as long as it didn't infringe on him.
Right.
He was fine.
I know the article in the Telegram was. It told you. Remember it? It told about how overwhelmed he was with unclaimed bodies. I think everything from ashes and urns or whatever to wrapped up. I don't know how they do it. He had wasn't he running out of room in the freezer downstairs or something?
I'm not sure about that. What he did do is he did have to build a separate little kind of, I guess for lack of a better term, a refrigerated shed
Yeah.
outside to contain some of the overflow, because you do have to refrigerate them. But again, he took them because no one else would. And, you know, sometimes frankly, it got him in trouble legally. You could say, well, did he technically break the law? Sure, but, you know, the alternative in his mind was worse, which is that somebody just sits in a morgue in the hospital and they rot away. And he wasn't going to have that.
No, he wasn't. Tell us another story. I mean, I've got. Tell us.
I mean, there's. I guess let me see.
We're talking about the late Peter Stefan. He was the mortician, the funeral director at the. Now, did I say it right? Graham Putnam Mahoney.
Graham
Got
Putnam
it
Mahoney
right.
Funeral Parlors.
Okay.
Yes.
Wonder why he didn't change the name.
Probably just for the name recognition and. Well, here's one. He always told people sort of the way it was. He wasn't afraid to say, this is the way it is and this is the way it's going to be. It's politically incorrect to call a person fat, regardless of the enormity of their circumference. That's typical Peter. One day I had a conversation with the least thinnest person I had ever seen, who actually had a great sense of humor about his size. So the man said, you'll never bury me because you don't have a casket big enough. Peter said, what are you talking about? Yours will be the easiest burial I ever did. And the guy said, how so? And Peter said, because I'll give you an enema and I'll just bury you in a shoebox.
Oh, I remember. Oh my God, I remember that one. Oh.
It doesn't continue, so I don't know what the guy said, but I'm sure it was laughter.
Well, I wonder how Peter did it. Or did the guy chicken out and say, I'm not going to...
Honestly, I don't know what actually happened, but that was his retort to a lot of things.
Did he do... I hate these details, but did he do the cleaning out process himself? Or?
The embalming?
Yeah.
He did some at first, but he actually had other people that specialized in that and were licensed to... he was licensed too, but
Yeah.
he had other people that handled all the...
Families are interesting. Now, my family, as far as I know, no one was cremated, and sort of like in a Jewish tradition, we had our loved one buried pretty much as soon as possible. So we didn't go for open caskets. You could have pictures.
Oh, I'm Jewish too, and I...
Oh, yeah. I'm not, but I just love
to-
their tradition. I relate to it. And I think the philosophy in my family was, I want to remember the person the way they were when they were alive.
Yep.
I don't need to be checked. If I want to make sure my husband or my father are in there, I'll ask you to lift the hood.
Right.
Other than that, No, I can see putting pictures of how they were, and people do some wonderful
absolutely.
collages. Did Peter get into that, letting people make big collages of their family and all?
He pretty much let them do whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
He did one thing that one of the stories, and it's not a funny story. It's actually one of the more heartwarming stories. He went to a woman's house. Gentleman had died, was in the house, and the woman said, you know, what I would appreciate is, could you just let me stay with my husband for one more night.
Yeah.
Now, you're not really supposed to do that, but he put the person, a helper, put the man in his favorite chair, brought the chair into the bedroom, and the woman sat there all night with him, talking to him all night, and picked him up Peter came the next day, picked him up, buried him in a grave in his chair. He created an extra large casket, put him and the chair, I think it was an old piano case, in his rocking chair, in his lazy boy or whatever.
How'd they get that big?
I don't even know, but buried him in it because he just wanted. The woman wanted one last night with him, and normally most people would say, "I'm sorry, I can't do that." He said, "Just."
That's just amazing. There should be a movie about Peter.
We were thinking of.
This is perfect.
Already thinking of a TV show about it.
You know something? Even the title, Mumblings of a Mortician, that got me. As soon as I got this in the mail from you, and I'm like, oh man, this is perfect. We've been talking with Art Sesnovich, right?
Sesnovich.
And he and Frank Quaglia. The G is
silent.
Were working together on Peter Stephan's. Basically, it's a memoir of all of the things, a lot of that happened to Peter, the funeral director in Worcester there. Well, they're heart-wrenching and funny, everything at the same time. And I said it before, but I had a grandfather like this, and he smoked a pipe. He was like this. And as you said, a lot of people probably think it's like their grandpa.
They probably relate to it for that reason. Actually, one of the funny things, just as a side note, we were promoting the book on Facebook, and they wouldn't let us do it because of the pipe, him smoking a pipe on the front.
Why?
Because they won't. Facebook, I know everybody has their issues with Facebook, and this is not meant to be a rant about it, but they wouldn't let us promote it because of the cover photo and promoting tobacco products. And
for God's sake.
There's nothing we could do because now that's the cover. We can't do anything about it. So
I don't think it's promoting it at all.
Well,
it's the last thing I think of.
I think Mark Zuckerberg would disagree with you. So
a lot of grandpas smoke.
We promoted other ways. We found other ways to do it.
Okay, before we close, all right, one more time. How can they get a hold of you and the book?
Sure. If you wanted to email me just to tell me you like the book, or which I always love to hear from people who have read it, it's art, A-R-T, at bulldog, B-U-L-L-D-O-G, dash communications with an S.com. That's art at bulldog dash, don't forget the dash, communications.com. And the book is available on Amazon. Just plug in the search function, plug in Mumblings of a Mortician. The book will come up, and then you can order it either through Kindle or print on demand. Read it any way that you prefer.
You've got to get this book. You really do. Now there'll be a copy, right, downstairs in the Upton Library. I know if you're out of the country, whatever, once you're on YouTube, a lot of people watching, but make it a point to get Mumblings of a Mortician. True, about a very kind-hearted and funny funeral director who was in Worcester. Thank you for being with us, Frank. Do you have another book coming up? Do you think? Is this your first and only?
It is my first, but I hope it's not my only.
Aha, we have a future artist. Oh, author here. That's good. What do you think you would do? Would you do things like this?
Honestly, I don't know. I've also written a few screenplays and a few TV scripts and things like that. So writing's just kind of in my blood. So not sure what's next. I never know what I'm having for breakfast, so who knows? It could, who knows what the next project will be.
Say hello to Frank for us.
I will absolutely do that.
And maybe we'll have you back on again because there's so much in here. We can't cover it 30 minutes.
Well,
thank you.
You have to buy the book to get the full story.
Yes. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
We'll see you next time. We'll be my guest.
On a shooting star, heading out toward a dream. Tomorrow's even closer than it seems.